From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Wednesday, November 5, 2025. Interest rates could go up in December. That's the alarming warning from economists after the Reserve Bank held the cash rate at 3.6% on Tuesday. The RBA board says inflation is still stubbornly high, thanks to accelerating consumer spending and low unemployment. The AUKUS military pact is going great guns with US-designed combat systems to be used on Australian-built nuclear submarines. It follows a review by US defence bigwigs who said they wanted to be sure the partnership is fit for purpose. But President Donald Trump has since declared it's full steam ahead. That exclusive is live right now at theaustralian.com.au. It's nearly 50 years since the dismissal of the Whitlam government, a story that shaped the journalism and the life of our own editor-at-large, Paul Kelly. Back then, Paul was a 28-year-old political correspondent, literally sprinting through Parliament to break the news. I interviewed Paul for a documentary we're publishing today, and in this episode of The Front, he tells us his story of Australian politics' most dramatic day.
I took 5 minutes out, about 7 p.m, before I started to write, thinking to myself, stay calm, be professional, don't write some emotional piece of trash. Write something for the ages.
This is Paul Kelly, The Australian's editor-at-large. He's 78 years old and the doyen of Australian political journalists. Politicians from every side sweat on what Paul will write about them in his pieces for The Australian. Today, Paul's telling a story we all think we know, but he has a unique and pretty dramatic take. It's the November 11, 1975 sacking of the Whitlam government. Paul was just 28, and the dismissal had huge consequences for him, as well as for the country. We've turned Paul's account of the dismissal into a documentary that's live now on theaustralian.com.au.
The future of the country was very much on the line. That's how we saw it, that's how I saw it.
Well, may we say, God save the Queen. Because nothing will save the Governor-General.
The doco is a gripping first-hand account of how a Labor Prime Minister, Gough Whitlam, was thrown out of office by the Governor-General Whitlam had personally chosen. It includes the unforgettable scenes of Whitlam standing on top of the steps of Parliament House, making that famous speech, and opposition leader Malcolm Fraser, who'd just been handed the Prime Ministership, making his way through a baying mob out the front.
Calling out, abusing Fraser, the sense of anger is palpable.
He sacked the Prime Minister.
I mean, we'd never imagined this would happen.
I showed Paul the page one story he wrote that day, published in The Australian.
Well, may we say, God save the Queen. Oh, God. Oh, jeez.
You've told me that you felt that the dismissal of the Whitlam government was an outrage, but I looked back at your coverage from the day. On Wednesday, November 12, your report on page one of The Australian is very straight. Why did you write it so straight?
One of the things about being a political journalist is that you think through how you're going to operate. What are the principles you're going to follow as a journalist? And I guess I decided very early on that I was going to be, as much as I could, in terms of news coverage, a professional, impartial journalist. Did I have firm views about what was going on in politics? You bet I did. And so then in my columns, in my contributions to the op-ed page, in my commentary, I expressed what those views were, I think, in a pretty strong and powerful way. Whitlam campaigned on a mandate to transform the country. No Prime Minister in Australian history has ever put such an ambitious mandate to the people. He wanted a nation that was more caring, that was greatly committed to social justice, better education, better health, a more independent foreign policy, and he believed the country had become moribund in the final years of the previous coalition government under Billy McMahon.
The introduction of universal healthcare, the withdrawal of Australian troops from Vietnam, the introduction of no-fault divorce, just some of the huge changes that the Whitlam government brought about. But beneath the surface of this government, things were not going well in an administrative sense, where they were struggling to actually run the government.
There's never been a government like the Whitlam government. We lived it 24/7. Every day, every week, every month for 3 years. And the experience covering the Whitlam government in 1 year was the equivalent of 3 or 4 years covering a normal government. So that was a really exciting time. But the interesting thing about the Whitlam government was that it did a lot of really great things and it did a lot of really bad things. And so you had this extraordinary combination of the great and the ill-considered being fused together. That made it very exciting for a political correspondent.
In the hundreds of divisions which have taken place in the House of Representatives last year and this year, the Labor government has never been defeated.
There was an increasing sense of apprehension and reservation across much of the country. And the Liberal and National parties tapped into that sense of apprehension, the sense of reservation, which became, in the end, a sense of anger. We saw higher inflation and higher unemployment, and the government really struggled to come to grips with that economic challenge. The second extraordinary feature was the Khemlani loan. The Minerals and Energy Minister, Rex Connor, with Whitlam's full support, wanted to raise an external loan to finance the resources sector. Instead of doing this through the normal channels in New York, they picked a Pakistani moneylender, Tyrath Khemlani. I mean, what else would you do, obviously? And they got Executive Council approval to give the loan commission to Tyrath Khemlani. To say this was a mistake doesn't even begin to describe what happened. It was an atrocity, and it really alarmed the Governor-General, Sir John Kerr. This was the start of the alienation between Kerr and Whitlam.
Talking to Paul, even 50 years later, it's clear these three men, all dead now, Gough Whitlam, Malcolm Fraser and John Kerr, loom large in his memory.
Here's the story. It's the morning of the 11th of November. Kerr is at Government House. He's got the documents prepared. And the dismissal letter. He's going to liquidate Whitlam's Prime Ministership at lunchtime that day, because he believes if he gives the slightest signal to Whitlam that he has reservations about what Gough is doing, Whitlam will contact the palace to have Kerr sacked. This is the most extraordinary showdown in Australian political history. Whitlam and Fraser had a meeting at 9 a.m. There was a feeling in the government lobbies, there was a feeling within the Labor Party and the Labor caucus, they were on the verge of a great victory. Gough was about to go to Government House to seek a half-Senate election for the Governor-General. Gough was intimidating the Governor-General in public, and he was not confiding with the Governor-General in private. He didn't understand human nature. He did not understand Sir John Kerr. It was a catastrophic mistake. The mood on the Liberal side under Malcolm Fraser was very different. They were quiet. They were calm. There wasn't much noise. There wasn't much cheering. When the coalition parties met that morning, Fraser said to them, "We're not going to discuss the crisis." And when that meeting broke, and the journalists found that there'd been no discussion of the crisis during the opposition party meeting, journalists drew the wrong conclusion and felt Fraser was on the defensive. Fraser was in trouble. Well, the media often gets it wrong, and the media got that one wrong big time.
Paul's written 5 books on the dismissal directly, and because it was a seismic event in Australian politics, the story has shaped many of the millions of words he's written on everything else in the intervening 50 years.
There is a form of conspiracy about the 11th of November. Let's get clear what it is and what it isn't. The CIA was not involved. The Queen and Buckingham Palace were not involved. The dismissal was Kerr's own work. It was his project, it was his planning, it was his conspiracy. But at 9:55am that morning, the Governor-General rang Malcolm Fraser as opposition leader and put a series of questions to him. And those questions were, can you tell me, Mr. Fraser, if you were to be commissioned as Prime Minister, would you advise a general election? Would you advise a double dissolution? Would you obtain supply as soon as possible? Malcolm Fraser, surprise, surprise, answered yes to each question. Kerr tipped off Fraser the morning of the dismissal. I've called it the tip-off. That's what it was. Kerr was the one who orchestrated the whole thing. Kerr believed in the reserve powers. It was fundamental to his views as a lawyer. It was fundamental to his whole intellectual approach. Whitlam didn't know this.
The reserve powers are a much debated point of constitutional law in Australia. Basically, it's the idea that the Governor-General, as the local representative of our head of state, the monarch, at the moment King Charles III, has the power to take action in the event of a crisis. In this case, the government couldn't get its budget through the Senate. Kerr firmly believed that if the government couldn't effectively govern, it was his job to dismiss the government and call a new election.
And so when Whitlam asked Kerr to become Governor-General, he had no idea that he was inviting the man who he wanted to become Governor-General, that this man had a passionate view of the reserve powers. Not only that, Sir John Kerr was probably the worst appointment of anyone in Australia that Whitlam could have made Governor-General. And Whitlam didn't realise. He did no due diligence on his appointment of Kerr as Governor-General. Extraordinary. I think Sir John Kerr was an unworthy Governor-General, and I think he compromised and left a stain on the office. Kerr was obsessed with this idea that Whitlam was prepared to sack him, and that's why he concealed his hand from the Prime Minister. So Kerr dismissed Whitlam in a constitutional ambush.
Coming up, the day the Australian dismissed Paul Kelly and how he came back stronger than ever. The Australian was taking a strong editorial line about the constitutional crisis. The Australian was, in fact, in its editorials, encouraging Sir John Kerr to end this situation and essentially dismiss the Whitlam government, including on the morning of the actual dismissal. You were young, you were 28, but you were very senior at the paper. You were the most senior person in the Federal Parliamentary Press Gallery Bureau. Did you have moments of concern about the juxtaposition between your desire to do straight reporting, your personal view that the dismissal would be wrong, and the Australian's very strong position on it?
The Australian did have a strong position in late 1975, and that position was that the Whitlam government was a danger to the country, that the economic policy it was following was too great a problem for the country, and the Australian supported Malcolm Fraser when he blocked the budget, and then the Australian supported Sir John Kerr when he sacked the Whitlam government. I'd been very critical of the Whitlam government in my coverage, but I was very critical of the way the Whitlam government was liquidated. What happened at the end was, and I understood this, the editor of the paper said to me that my views on Kerr's dismissal of Whitlam and my views on Fraser's blocking of the budget were such that it wasn't tenable for me to remain as political correspondent of the paper. The differences between myself and the paper were too great. I understood that. I mean, I later, many, many years later, became editor-in-chief of The Australian. And so I've had the experience of sitting in the editor's chair and sitting in the political correspondent's chair. So I understood all that. What happened was that I moved on. I didn't remain as political correspondent of the paper, and the following year I left the paper.
There must have been a small sense of justice when you came back and ultimately became editor-in-chief.
It was a long time later, Ken Cowley, the chief executive, and Rupert Murdoch, over dinner one night in Sydney, offered me the position of editor-in-chief of the paper, which was an enormous privilege.
Looking back at your 28-year-old self, what would you say to him now about his feelings about all of that?
You've got me with that. You've got me. Stop. It was just, That's the only question today I can't answer because it's about what I think of me.
Yeah. Did you have a sense that you'd been wronged at the time, and then when you became editor-in-chief and thinking about some of the 28-year-olds who were working for you, did you have a different opinion of your conduct back then?
I didn't think I'd been wronged. I regarded the fact that I'd been political correspondent of the paper and had the chance to cover this extraordinary government and get to know Whitlam and all these ministers and write about them and assess them and support them and criticise them. I regarded this as a phenomenal privilege. I always had this sense of the responsibility vested in my job, what a privilege it was, and how I had to do everything I could in the most professional sense possible to discharge the responsibilities of the job. So no, when the editor indicated to me, look mate, we can't wear you anymore, I accepted that. I didn't feel that I'd been wronged at all.
You were 28. You were very senior, but you were inexperienced, I suppose, as a journalist compared to your level of experience now. Do you look back at yourself as a kind of brash young thing who was maybe a bit too bold with his opinions, or not?
Look, to be perfectly frank, in those days, you had to be a little bit aggressive, a little bit brash, and a little bit bold if you were working in a political correspondence job in the press gallery, and if you didn't have some of those qualities, you were crushed. You wouldn't survive 24 hours, let me tell you. The pressure every day was simply enormous. This was a question of survival. It was that elemental.
You got to have a life in journalism, up close to the most exciting things happening in Australia. What's journalism given you?
Journalism has given me so much. I mean, I've had the most fortunate and lucky career because journalism for me has been a project of discovery, excitement, perpetual learning. The point about being a journalist is that every day is unique, every day is different, every day you learn something new, every day you have a new experience. It's an absolute privilege to be a journalist and a special privilege to be a political journalist.
Paul Kelly is The Australian's editor-at-large. He's not going anywhere, and his journalism rings as clear and true as ever. You can check out our documentary and Paul's column from today, it's a doozy, right now at theaustralian.com.au.